Yeah, hello, welcome to this video. Yeah, this video will be the first of a little but interesting, I hope, series that deals with a question that actually arises pretty often in practical chess, and this is how to win with black if the opponent plays a very rock-solid opening, and this is called the London system. In fact, it happens really often that you play against this opening, especially in blitz and rapid games. It is even more popular than in tournament chess, but even in tournament chess you get it rather often. What I'm talking about is a setup in which white sets up the pieces as follows. Don't really take black's move into account so much. Bishop f4, e3, bishop d3, and very often he plays even c3, knight d2, something like this. It's essentially this setup: bishop on f4, knight on f3, and these 3 pawns here, e3, d4, c3, that signal this this London system, this setup. And this is of course employed against all kinds of black setups. What I just put on the board is a Queen's Gambit type of setup, but of course it is played in these kind of positions where black's pawn stays on d7, and he adopts something like a Queen's Indian setup. It is played when black played g6, so against the King's Indian. Very often white even puts in h3 as a mix to prepare this kind of flight square for the bishop and make some luft for the king. Yeah, you face this rather often, and one problem is that it is actually a pretty good opening for white. It's not very ambitious and not very much an opening that puts lots of pressure on you as black, but it is very hard to crack. Obviously it is solid. It's very often something like a Slav defense with an extra tempo, especially if black plays d5 and the Slav is very solid. So what this small series, which will comprise of three parts, will do is suggest some way to play as black against that, so that you have some idea how to get a position that you can also try to play for win as black. It's not like you can get an advantage. This is a very solid opening for white, but there are ways to play to get some tension in the position. So the 3 parts mean this video will be about setups where black has played d5. The second video will be about setups with bishop f4 where black has played, oops, of course e6, where black has played e6 and didn't move the d pawn, so probably something like this, like e6, b6, like a Queen's Indian. And the third video will deal with the King's Indian setup. I'm not quite sure in which order I'll make 2 and 3, but it's essentially one setup with g6, one setup with e6, and one with d5. And we start with d5. So the London system in this fashion. White usually starts with the move knight f3. In fact, there is a very solid and good argument to be made that bishop f4, bishop f4 on move 2 is the better move here. In fact, I'm pretty sure that this is the case. I'll also show you why, but let's first start with knight f3. On this, I recommend as black to play just knight f6, which should fit with most of black's repertoire choices. In fact, you also must take into account that white, of course, can play a normal Queen's Gambit. So if you answer d4 with d5, you want to play this, the classical Queen's Gambit or the Slav. And in each case, or you can take, of course, in each case, the knight on f6 is fine. Another way could be if you intend to play this triangle setup, like talking about this here, then probably you should play this, and after this setup in a Slav fashion, But okay, this is a specific move order. You could also play this, but this is different, obviously, because what I recommend will involve in developing the bishop. So knight f6 should, in most cases, suit you just fine for your repertoire choice. Yeah, and then we've got bishop f4. Yeah, here black has more than one good system, but I think one is particularly effective, and this is simply what you should play, and this is c5. Black just pushes in the center and yeah, plays yeah, like a queen's gambit. He's making this break himself, and the problem is in a way that any kinds of taking on c5 isn't too great for white, as the bishop is not particularly well placed in a queen's gambit accepted scenario. You can attack it here, this pawn, and we'll get it back, and this bishop is not particularly well placed. So white pretty much all the time answers with a pawn move, supporting this pawn, and then knight c6 and c3. Note that if white would take, you can get the pawn back easily with this move. White has no way to cover this. And in fact, this bishop is not particularly well placed for this structure. So white, and this is happens all the time, white will just play c3 because it's just the normal program move for the London system. Yeah, and here a very important move, this is queen b6. Instantly attacking this b2 pawn, which is obviously a soft spot in white's structure, as the bishop is developed outside the pawn chain, and white needs to take care of this pawn. He cannot sacrifice it in any way. And the usual way that people cover it is probably not even the best way. Queen b3 is by far the most popular move, but it's questionable if this is really good, to be honest. A pawn move like b3 is simply bad because you weaken the dark squares here by some extent. And the further setup is really easy. Black just develops the bishop. He can go here or also to g4 if you like. It's both fine. Let's say bishop f5. I like that more. And then you just build a normal setup here with e6. This bishop is outside the pawn chain, and there's some kind of symmetry in the center, but black has got the more aggressive pawn on c5. He's the one to determine when will be an exchange on d4, and these squares are really problematic. b3 is a stupid move in these structures. Black can even think of here, instead of bishop f5, also a g6 setup is not bad, because this bishop will also put some pressure on the diagonal. So, oops, I didn't want to take back all the moves. I'm sorry, I need to put them on again. Just hit the wrong button. So we were here, and I just explained why that b3 is not so great. Other options always lead to the same thing. Queen b3 is something that I showed separately, but let's say queen c1. This is also a way to cover this. You can simply develop here and continue with e6 and have a fine development. You simply have, as mentioned, the more aggressive pawn structure. It's still fairly solid for white, there's no question, but it's a position that you can easily continue to play as black and don't have any problems whatsoever. A long-term plan can be to play on the queen side, of course. Note that, and this is important, if white covers from the side here, queen c2 covering this, you have the neat move bishop f5 available. Bishop f5. Or probably even take first and then bishop f5. Let's say something like this, so that white cannot take on c5. And now you have just won a tempo here, because white cannot take on f5. Queen takes b2. Will pick up the rook in the corner. So this isn't recommended for white. If white plays queen b3, you answer with c4, which is an important move. Now white retreats usually, which is answered by bishop f5 again. You really need to take note of this idea. It's very important because it wins your tempo, as white has nothing better to retreat. And then black can play e6, or you can also play h6 to make some retreat square if you like, or knight h5 is also interesting, immediately attacking this bishop. So black is really fine here. Those one tempos have some significance. Rather often white exchanges though, and this is probably even worse, as now white faces this unpleasant idea of an advance of the b pawn. Let's say knight to d2 and then b5, b4 is really a problem. Let's say here, and yeah, white is struggling really to get a decent game. Very often it leads to a very quick disaster. Let's say, for example, white castles, then you can take and a move like this even, yeah, it's hard for white to do anything other than knight b1. You can go here, but in the long run, this is just a problem, this pawn. Also note bishop f5, e6, bishop a3, b2, these kind of things. It's just a weakness on c3. Of course, b7 also is on an open file and so on, but white cannot attack it. So this is a very nice position if white exchanges on b6. In fact, this is a position where black in practical play scores far more than, I think, close to 70% or something. White has a disastrous score here. It's really really miserable. But this happens rather often in practice. I get this often. Important is if white really covers this way. I showed this before, that here in this kind of position, let's say h3, I just put the normal moves on the board. Castles, should be 7, knight d2, castles, this kind of stuff. This is what usually happens. And then you need to be patient and play on the queen side. There can be various ideas. There can be the idea of play c4 at one point, especially if you can support it with b5. The queen is a bit silly here and probably needs to be relocated. One idea could be, for example, to play something like rook c8 and even drop the queen back to get the b pawn into play. So your general idea is to play on the queen side, trying to make something happen there. Note that white has no advantageous way to change the pawn structure. This is very important to note, that if you get rid of the arrows, that white in this structure has no favorable way to change it. He cannot play e4. This is controlled multiple times. He cannot really play c4, as this would weaken the d4 pawn and lead to a pretty bad isolated pawn position. Taking on c5 is also not particularly attractive, like giving up the center like this, with black having an extra pawn in the center. White can start some play with b4, but it's nothing you should be afraid of. Black has all pieces working nicely on the queen side, and this means white has no favorable pawn breaks, which in essence means if white doesn't have any favorable pawn breaks, black must have one, and he can play, as mentioned, rook c8, queen back, and then try c4, b5, or you can take on d4 and play b5, b4 and as a minority attack. So there are multiple ideas for black. It's still completely solid for white. You can play these kind of maneuvers to exchange pieces, but in general this is a position which tends to be slightly more favorable for black even compared to what white can do in this position. Still, don't expect to win with quick mating attacks. This is not possible. So this is my basic suggestion against the London system, where white plays bishop f4. In case black plays d5 and has got this diagonal open, it's a good idea, as shown, to act quickly yourself with c5 knight c6, queen b6, and then bishop f5. There are various move orders that white can try to work against this plan. And one move order which actually is better than the one I showed before is to play this quick bishop f4. The idea is the following. If black now plays knight f6, white can start with e3, c5, c3, knight c6. So it's very similar. If white would now play knight f3, we would get after queen b6 the variation that I just showed before. But white can also start with this move, and this is actually a good alternative. The idea is, if black now plays queen b6, which isn't bad really, you can do that. If white now responds queen b3, black plays c4, just like shown before, then in this position here, bishop f5 is just a blunder. White can take it, as now you can save the rook, of course. Is there maybe something better even? Let's check quickly. Queen b2. Yeah, maybe this move is even better. Also having this idea. Not instantly, because the rook is hanging, but it's better to get the queen back. So it's just a piece basically. Bishop f5 blunders a piece. And yeah, okay, this possibility not working is a setback for black. It's not terrible, but I actually recommend to, in this move order here, to not even play queen b6. It's not really necessary. Instead, you can play various other moves. A good solid choice, for example, is, especially if you, for example, play the Caro-Kann, which is a popular opening, you can just take if you like. C takes d is bad for white, not like terrible, but the knight is simply not well placed in a Slav exchange. Black can just develop easily. Or after this, you just play bishop f5 or bishop g4, and it's just like a Caro-Kann exchange, very solid for black. Another possibility would be after knight d2 to instantly play this move, which also could transpose to lines that we looked at before. If white plays now this, then there's again queen b6, and it's pretty much a transposition. So black has multiple good ideas. You can also play g6 if you like. It's also a possibility. The only thing that I really don't like so much is here this queen b6 idea. As mentioned, as queen b3 is a good answer, because now with bishop f5 not possible instantly, it's not so nice. Black can prepare this with g6, but this allows e4, and this gets complicated. It's not terrible for black, but rather complicated. If you like, you can study this stuff. It's quite interesting. Okay, this is one move order issue here. If black plays knight f6. However, you can try something else even. You can also play the immediate c5, which is interesting. And this allows a couple of other options, especially now from white. White can now play an interesting gambit. This is e4. Really a fun move. The basic idea is that if black takes on e4, white plays d5, and it's like an Albin's counter gambit with an extra tempo in bishop f4. Yeah, black plays knight f6 here, knight c3. In fact, you don't need to take on e4, but I think it's you should do that really. And I actually had this on the board once in a tournament game last year, and I played the move a6, which is similar to the Albins, where I also play a3. And yeah, this is quite interesting. Like queen e2 is the normal move then, and g6, castles long. It's quite interesting. So you don't need to worry in this position that your opponent bores you to death. It's really a sharp opening. quite funny after bishop f4 to get such a sharp position. You only need to be aware of that. If you play the instant c5, that e4 is a valid idea, and it has been discussed in books, so it's not like completely offbeat that people would never know this. However, you can, as mentioned, also start with this move and then play c5. It's a matter of move orders, what kind of things you like to avoid and you like to allow. The immediate c5 is different in this regard, that if you look at this position, c3, that here actually you could spare with this, with knight f6, and play something else here. For example, here, queen b6, which is yet a different thing. The knight is not out. So let's say queen b3, c4, queen c2, then this move is possible again. At least tactically, it's possible. It's not completely clear. White can probably take this and take d5 and so on. So it's a different kind of line. Actually, my recommendation for simple play is to start with knight f6 and then play c5. It's easier to do. But if you know, for example, that your opponent plays this e4 things, then and you like to have this kind of fight, then you can also play c5 instantly. This is the only real, let's say a drawback is the wrong word. It's not terribly great for white, but this is one thing you need to be aware if you play the immediate c5. Yeah, in fact, this is pretty much all you need to know about combating the London system if you play d5. This is one, I always thought so, at least one advantage of playing one d5 against d4, that the London here is pretty much, it's very easy for black to play with the c5 setup, especially if white plays knight f3 first, which is still the most common move forward, and then c5 really is absolutely nothing for white. Cannot even hope for the slightest of advantages, and you still have some play going. It's not a completely lame equality. All right, this is the first part of this anti-London series, and I'll do this the further episodes with e6 and g6 pretty soon. So check out my channel for this for these two additional videos.